Live. Okay, so hi everyone and welcome to CX for Soul. We're so happy that everyone can join us and make it online despite the weather. If I suddenly disappear, I get hotspot, so please bear with me. So before any formal introductions, we wanted to kickstart with an activity. In the invite, you were told to bring 3 plastic bags, so hopefully you have them at hand. And without further ado, one of our fantastic panelists, Paul Miller, is going to kick off with a little juggling lesson.
Excellent. So hello, everybody. Paulie the Clown. Okay, I realize there's a lot of people out there scared of clowns. We sell billions of cheeseburgers. We are effective, us clowns. All right. So every time you throw, you catch. You throw the Kroger, Goodwill. Oh, throw it, catch it, throw it, catch it, throw it. Yeah, across your body. Across. Every time you throw, you catch. They float nice and easy. I told you, rhythm, gravity, and consistency.
Well, thank you very much for that, Paul. It's the first time that I've been taught how to juggle, and definitely something I can fine-tune. And if my CX career doesn't work out, I can always transition to the circus.
That's right.
Yeah, so before we get started with the event tonight, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. My name is Flavia Springer, and I am a CSM at Aircall. Ancol is the host of this event, and we're a cloud-based phone system, and we provide VoIP phone services for sales, support, and general business needs. And if you need any more information about us, you can reach out to me directly, go to our website, or request a demo from one of our lovely sales members. So Aircall really started this series to discuss the various ways that we can bring joy into our lives. With the ongoing pandemic, our personal and our professional lives have become very much blended, so it's extremely important that we try to incorporate joy into our life as much as possible. And I hope this event sheds some light on the different ways that we can define joy and apply these lessons to different aspects of our life. As you know, we do have an ongoing social media contest, so please post on LinkedIn and tag Aircall using #CX4Soul, and we will donate $5 per post to the Boys and Girls Club of America. One quick admin piece before we get started. Any questions you may have can be posted directly into the chat, and they will be answered throughout, but we'll also have a Q&A at the end. And finally, let's just take a moment to bring ourselves into the present to really get everything out of the session. So please join me in closing out any other internet tabs you may have open, silencing your cell phone, muting your Slack, and let's take a deep breath. So now let's get started. So we have 4 amazing panelists with us today, and all of you have amazing stories. So let's kick off the discussion with each of you just highlighting your personal and professional backgrounds so we can have some context on where you get your perspective of joy. So Tracey, do you want to kick us off?
Oh boy. Okay. Where do I get my joy? I get my joy from actually just having downtime. I'm one of those people who I am very depleted by a day full of talking and listening, even though that's what I do for a living, is listen to people. But being around my family and my now 1-year-old dog, who he gives us a lot of joy, spending time with my family and spending time just doing what I want to do instead of meeting other people's needs, that gives me joy.
Thanks. So Monty, do you want to kick it off next?
So Monte Williams, I bring to the conversation over 15 years of customer experience. I am one of the few that has worked their way up through the ranks from being an actual doer and an agent all the way through the senior executive piece. I've decided to take a pivot in my career and start a leadership development company because I believe that every problem in the world can be solved through an investment in people. And if we are willing to make that investment in people, then the returns on that are absolutely priceless. So what my company does is we focus on adding value and helping to help people lead themselves in a more effective way so that they can add the most value to whatever environment that they're in. I focus on CX professionals specifically because that's my space and that's my home. But I do it for people in all walks of life, all areas. So I've been married for 15 years. I have 2 boys, a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old. They are my world. So when I think about leadership and CX, I lead from this perspective of add value to the lives of others because that's tied to my purpose in life.
Cool. Paul, do you want to jump in now?
Sure. I dropped out of college to join the circus. I was with the Ringling Brothers back in the 1900s. I lived on the circus train, and I'm really not that bright. Like the CX just hit me. It's like, this is a great experience. I've never done anything like this virtually. And it's like, oh, that's customer experience. That's what CX is. So like I had this kind of thank you, Tracey, by the I'm like, oh, what is this CX thing?
I still didn't know. So thanks for telling us what it was.
I've been so fortunate. I've hosted circus artists from 36 different countries to Ludlow, Kentucky, to help us create Circus. And this terrible tragedy that happened in Beirut. I've got a good clown friend who is in Beirut right now. And I met her in Vienna at this healthcare clowning experience, and we were out late night at the falafel stand, and it was an Israeli clown, an American clown, and a Lebanese clown all figuring out the world's problems at an all-night falafel stand, drinking some beer. And I've done a lot of work with kids in jail because I believe if you're good at stealing cars, you're perfect for the circus. You are focused and you are fearless. And I've worked in like a lot of very gifted situations with kids who have everything under the sun, and they don't have the patience to learn juggling because if they can't do it immediately, they turn off. So circus is been around a long time. I like to flex my white privilege in a way that's kind of crazy to create opportunities through the circus for people. And I like to kind of say, if it weren't for me being in the circus, I'd be dead or I'd be in jail because, there's good trouble out there. And it's a really great honor to be working here in this new platform. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And Suzanne, do you want to just complete the introductions and let us know a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Suzanne O'Brien. I'm a registered nurse by trade, and I've worked most of my nursing career in hospice care, which is end-of-life care, and or oncology care, which is cancer care. And it was literally in that space that I learned everything about living from my patients, from the journey, from the wisdom. And again, most of it is looking for joy. The life's journey is about joy, and it's really not what we have all been taught. So this is such an important, and I love the diversity, and it's so important because we all can access that joy, and I think we're all searching for it. So this is going to be great.
Can I interject something?
Yeah.
I just realized all I did was answer your question about joy. I didn't even introduce myself. So I'm Tracey Marks. I'm a psychiatrist, and I've been practicing a little over 20 years in the Atlanta area. And I treat adults, but my entire career, have had a very heavy emphasis on personal mindset, health, and not just say medicating a mental illness per se, but the sense of being happy and joyful and how do you get that? So that's where I come from.
Awesome. I think we have some really good mix of personal and professional backgrounds here. So I think let's jump into part 2, which is defining joy. So most of our audience are here because they want to find out how to add more joy into their life and how they can reflect that into their customer experience. But first, it's important that we get an understanding of what joy actually is and what it isn't. So the first question I want to ask you all is, what does joy mean to you? This kind of does lead directly into what you guys previously mentioned, but let's sort of dive into definitions or perspectives, and let's see what we have in common with the word joy.
Yeah, so I'll kick it off. So joy, I believe that joy is purpose. When you're able to identify what your purpose is, what your reasoning is for doing something, it allows you to anchor yourself in that. And then once you have that, once you have your anchor and you know what that is, it opens you up to this opportunity to be able to find that in every single thing that you do. So for me, joy is about understanding what purpose is, what your reasoning is, and then living in that day in and day out, and consciously making the choice to live in that day in and day out. And in doing that, you develop, you'll hear me talk a lot today about the relationship that you have with yourself, right? Because we are all leaders, whether you're leading an organization, whether you're leading a country, whether you're a mom or dad, right? It doesn't matter. Like, we're all leaders, and we all have a minimum requirement to lead ourselves. And I think that when we think about leadership, we kind of miss that piece. So when I think about joy, I think about it in a relational aspect, and in terms of how do you lead yourself with a sense of purpose, and anchor yourself in that reasoning.
Yep, definitely. How do you guys feel about that? Does anyone have any differing opinions or want to add to that?
I'll add to that. I was glad Monty went first because I didn't want to steal his thunder, because I know that you're very purpose driven. And because I define joy as peace and contentment, regardless of the circumstances. And so even if something horrible happens and you feel bad in the moment, or even very sad and depressed in the moment, you can still have this joy in the background. And I think one of the ways to accomplish that is having purpose and finding meaning in things, even things that on the superficially may seem meaningless, like maybe a job that you don't like, but still having other things that give you meaning and purpose.
Definitely. Suzanne and Paul, do you guys have anything you'd like to add to that as well?
Yeah,
I'll
sure.
chime in with
Oh, okay.
No, go ahead, please, Suzanne. Go ahead.
Thanks, Paul. Sorry, we just jumped in there. I love both of those, and I agree wholeheartedly about them. And I think today more than ever, when the world is chaotic and swirling on the outside so intensely, knowing that you can feel safe and feel joy and have a place of peace inside always. And it's an energy, and it is an alignment, and it is a frequency of vibration. And we'll get more into that and I can really, again, share stories from those that I work with towards the end of their life journey, finding joy sometimes for the first time, or the deepest at that space, which you wouldn't think so. So I want to share that, again, how it's an inside job, and it's a frequency and purpose and all of that. I agree 100%. And it's so important to know that that's accessible at any time, because as things are, again, very hard, it's great that you can hold on to something or access it always. Thanks, Paul.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think Suzanne, really, from a perspective of, the work that you do, I look at things as people are either going to be laughing or they're going to be crying, and what do people want to do? Kids laugh all the time at like slapstick, it's the Roadrunner and the Coyote. It's a little mouse getting the big cat, it's a power shift. And, to try and find that adults usually laugh at people. Like stand-up comedy is like derogatory often, and then there's situational comedy, and then there's like silly slapstick, and the role of the clown really is to fail at things, and it's through the consistent failure that people are like, you're so dumb, and it's like, but it's a lot of it's playing dumb as well. So I'll just offer that perspective on what do we laugh at as adults, and I think, again, unfortunately often it is making fun of something that's other than us. And where do we get our joy from? Is it a Polish joke or a religious joke, or what is it? And being so fortunate to be a clown who plays the fool, who falls down, people laugh, we get up and do it again. Like, I hate to say it, but like if this old lady falls outside the grocery store, like I'm laughing inside, and I know I shouldn't be because it's not appropriate, but it just shows you potentially my childhood or just my frame of reference when it comes to joy creation. How do we get to that place where people are either laughing or are crying?
Okay, cool. So I think we all generally agree that joy can be found within, and there's aspects to external factors that can contribute to that. But what can we agree that isn't joy? What is the flip side of that? And are there common misconceptions about joy that you guys encounter? I mean, Tracey and Suzanne, when you work with your clients, do you have any insight into what joy isn't from that side of things?
I think it isn't milestones and the accumulation of things. I'll see ambitious people who feel like once they reach a certain point, either in their career or financially, then they'll have joy or be happy. They'll think of it more as happiness. Or say a single person, I was one of those in residency and medical school and waiting a long time, who feel like they're missing out on these milestones that everyone else has, marriage and a family. And when they have those things, then they'll be happy and have joy. And it's not those things, because as Suzanne was saying, it comes from within, and you can have joy regardless of those things. So I think we can get too caught up on the externals.
Yep.
Yeah, so I agree again. And a lot of this knowledge and wisdom comes from these beautiful people at the end of life. And what's really interesting to me is that we basically are taught that joy or happiness is from those things, those accomplishments, those material things, goals. And those are fine, but that's not it. And so it's very confusing when people actually attain those things that they find themselves very unhappy. Mm-hmm. And they get really distraught, rightly so, because they work so hard for that. And where's the happiness? So we have to really teach them again that it is an energy, and we don't want people to miss every single day. That's where the miracles are. It's not the big things. It's not those big moments or parties. Those are fine. It's those magical moments that you're in sync with absolutely everything in that moment of presence, of mindfulness. Yeah.
Yeah. In listening to both Suzanne and Tracey, it makes me ask a question and just want to pose it. Do we think that there is a differentiation between happiness and joy? Because I believe that there is, and I think that we use the words as we use them interchangeably. But personally, I believe that there is a universal framework to think about joy, right? But that framework will lead to definitions that vary by person. And I'll give you an example, if I may. So I went on a job interview. The best way I can describe this is via CX, so forgive me. I went on a job interview early in my career, and it was for a CX manager role. And one of the questions that I was asked, and I still use this today, is what's the difference between customer service and customer experience? And I remember thinking about it because up to that point, I had never been forced to think about it critically, right? And the answer that I gave is the reason I found this out afterward. It was the reason why I got the job, because I understood it contextually, right? But the difference is my answer was customer service is transactional, right? And customer experience is relational. And I believe that the same holds true when we ask is there a difference between happiness and joy? I believe that happiness is transactional and that you can do something to make you happy momentarily, right? But joy is relational. And it's the relationship that you have with yourself first and then others, and it's more and it's more experience based in and of itself, right? And so I'm interested in understanding everybody else's perspective on it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think of happiness as more superficial, a superficial transient emotion that you can have at the time, whereas the joy is more sustaining and pervasive. And that I purposely used happiness in talking about, say, the ambitious person or the person who wants to get married, because those things are superficial accomplishments.
Right.
I love it. I think this is so good, diving deep into it, because it can go a lot of different ways. But and I just searched what the definition of joy is, and it says a feeling of great pleasure and happiness. So, you see where they are, but I agree with you. I think happiness can be, felt at the time period. And I think for me, I always equate joy with a flow, joyful, right. a consistent, I want more joy, most minutes of the day, every single day. That's what my goal is, to be in that joyful place of energy. Yeah.
So would you guys say that happiness is something that comes from like doing well in your job or having a situational thing that gives you that fleeting feeling of happiness, whereas joy can be more of an undercurrent based on your like overall relationship with yourself and other aspects of your life? Is that sort of the way you guys would say?
Yep, that's about it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think that, to use the term that we've been using, it's an inside job. Like joy is an inside job.
Yeah.
I could not agree with that more. Totally.
Yeah. So Paul, obviously you have a slightly different background.
So if it's like happy and sad, well, if it's like happy and sad, is it like joy and fear? Like what's like it's a neat kind of topic of discussion. Like happiness, transactional. So if it's happy and sad, what's the opposite of joy? Is it fear or what? What would be the
I'm very interested in Tracey.
It's a whole different Aircall thing to get there.
No, I'm interested. I'm interested. That's a great question, Paul. And I'm interested in Tracey and Suzanne's perspective being in the medical field, because I have a stance on it, but I'd love to hear it.
Me first? You first?
Sure, Tracey,
Okay.
Go ahead.
My opposite would be discontentment, because I think you can have a series of missteps and disappointments that even a disappointment can be a fleeting emotion, but discontentment is just this state of just, dissatisfaction with where you are in life, say.
Yeah, I like that a lot, because I always describe that there's only really two energies at play, and one is love and one is fear. And under fear, there's a whole long list of guilt, shame, anger, all of that. And I feel like that is the opposite, again, of that joyful state. Anxiety, anything that goes under that, which again is a long list, can be the opposite of living in joy.
Yes.
Nice. So, Suzanne, you just touched upon the things that fall under that fear category. The next question I want to pose to you guys is, now we know what joy is and what joy isn't. What do you believe gets in the way of joy and creates those roadblocks, such as fear, depression, and anxiety?
So I believe that, Suzanne, I believe exactly as you believe. In terms of the two choices in life, it's either love or fear, right? Okay. You either love something enough to take action, or you fear something enough to allow it to paralyze you into inactivity, right? I think in most cases, to add to that, in most cases, I find that the something that we usually fear is ourselves. And when we deconstruct that fear, it's usually anchored in four things when I talk to my clients. And just people in general. And those things are, one, limiting beliefs, right? Something you accept about your life, yourself, the world, that or people that limits you in some way. I think that that's a joy blocker. I believe that interpretations, an opinion or a judgment about an event, a situation, or an experience that you deem to be true. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. That's just how you interpret it, right? I think that is a joy blocker. I believe that assumptions are joy blockers, as defined as an expectation because something has happened in the past, it will happen again. So it stops you from taking that action, so to say. And in the last piece, and I struggle with this one a lot. This is the inner critic, the inner voice that says you aren't good enough, right? And I believe that is a blocker for joy. So those four things, I found that fear is rooted in those four things: limiting beliefs, assumptions, interpretations, and your inner critic. And if we commit ourselves to challenging our joy blockers daily, being highly aware and very sensitive to what some of our own thought patterns are, that over time we will experience more joy.
Yep.
That's very comprehensive, Monty. You covered a lot of things. If I were to add anything, which there's really nothing, you don't really need to add anything. I would add having unrealistic expectations. I think if you always think that something is supposed to be better, then you're never really happy or content with what you have. So you get something and then it still just seems, you can still feel empty. Like, what about this guy? He's got that. I don't have that. And now that's your new thing you want. So that's what I would add as far as unrealistic expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Paul, I have a quick question for you before we move on to the section 2. Obviously, you've worked in unique situations in detention centers and hospitals. How do you feel like having those relationships impacts your view of roadblockers of joy when people are in those, unique situations?
Well, in those situations, and I think even people who aren't caught up in a system, I think distractions can be, just get in the way of either feeling happy or sad or fear or joy. I mean, people are so consumed with something other than what is present. And we worked at Cincinnati Children's Hospital and Texas Children's Hospital for like 8 years. And when you're sitting in a waiting room for 2 or 3 hours, people are bored out of their mind. Mm-hmm. And it does not take them much to push them into a direction of being productive. Mm-hmm. So teaching spinning plates, like every kid on dialysis at Texas Children's and Cincinnati Children's Hospital could spin a plate. The doctors could not do it. The nurses couldn't do it. Sorry, Suzanne, just poking at you for a minute. But it's this it's this shift. It's this power dynamic, because when you're the kid with the broken arm and it's your dominant arm, so, say Susie is right-handed. She broke her right arm. She's learning how to spin a plate with her left hand. The nurse can't do it. Nobody at her school can do it. And it becomes this achievement. And as we get older, I think we achieve fewer and fewer things. Maybe someone golfs and maybe they love going golf. Does that make them happy? I think it makes them happy. If they get a hole in one, maybe that's joy, but like poking at people and encouraging them to experience something new, a new flavor, try some sriracha or get up and juggle bags. I think there's so much stasis, and I've enjoyed having an audience of people who are stuck at a Red Cross flood shelter. They lost everything. What are you going to do? It seems inappropriate for a clown to be there, which a lot of people poo-poo it, and it doesn't make sense. But the traditional role of the clown is like the power's here. At the top, it's the king, the empress, the president. On this side, there's the Congress and the Senate. They're trying to get to the king. This side, it's the yeoman. It's the people working the fields, the sharecroppers, the serfs, everybody. In the middle, there's the jester who's like, motherfucker, and they're pissing off everybody. Like they're outing the king or the empress. They're pissing off the wealthy people. They're pissing off the poor people. And then it's a really curious spot to be in. But I see people stuck all the time. And you just give them a little something and then they want it, and then you're just kind of reeling them in. So thank you. It is a weird archetypal role. I don't twist a lot of balloons, but, people think that's what I do as a clown. I mean, I'm not above it. I got a family to feed, so I'll twist balloons if I have to. But I'll just, offer that
nice
cuckoo perspective.
So I think we've very much defined joy, and the opposite of joy is something that's deeply personal and a relationship that you have with yourself and your own fears and anxieties. The next section, I'd love to dive into joy for yourself and ways that you can incorporate joy in your life. So what are small ways that you guys add joy into your day-to-day life? Suzanne, I know you do the 60 seconds of bliss, so this would be an ideal time for you to jump in.
Okay, all right. Sure. So again, it's about the journey. It's not the destination. And so, working in, again, the space that I work in, you just don't know, how much longer your life has. So why don't you have to find every day, you have to treat it as a gift. So I created this thing called, we have timeouts for children, something called a time in for ourselves. So a 5-minute time in alignment. And of course, we're super busy, but you can access that joyful, again, it's a vibration, it's an energy within a few minutes. And I always tell I tell my groups that if they don't have a few minutes in their day, something's going on that's wrong with their schedule. Mm-hmm. So one of the quickest ways that you can do this is stepping outside into nature. And if you can do it barefoot, great. But if you're just outside in nature, take a few deep breaths and really do what I call a presence exercise. Go ahead and see, what do you hear? What do you see? What do you smell? And really connect, open your heart. Let that flow of energy in, let it out. So let it let the universe bring it in and let it go out of and immediately you raise your vibrations and you're connected in a way that you haven't been most of the day. So you can do that again in 60 seconds. It's really great.
So like almost like mindfulness exercise and
absolutely
grounding yourself. Mm-hmm. Tracey and Monty, do you guys have anything to add to that, or any other perspectives on how do you bring joy into your day-to-day life?
Well, I have a very superficial, trite answer. I just binge watched all 5 seasons of Breaking Bad, and that gave me a lot of joy.
Love it.
I know that's not deep, but what it meant for me was I work a lot, and so just having time for me to not think hard and just enjoy great storytelling was very refreshing for me. But a different answer to that is I get a lot of joy out of I have a YouTube channel, and that's not to plug my YouTube channel, but what it gives me a lot of joy because I help more people than I see in my practice. And just given that I came into this profession as a doctor to help people, educating people and having people comment and write back and say, now I get it. Thanks so much for helping me understand. Like that gives me a ton of joy and more satisfaction than simply, my day-to-day activities, even though I do enjoy taking care of patients.
Yep. So you would say from your perspective, just helping others brings you a lot of joy and more so than, just helping yourself?
Yes.
Nice.
That's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So 2 things. One is I'm a creative. So I recognize that I did an experiment years ago where my first life was in the music industry. Loved it. I have synesthesia. So when I hear music, I see colors. So first life was in the music industry, and I didn't get the results that I wanted to see from the music industry. So I called myself throwing a tantrum and saying, I'm not going to touch anything to do with music for 9 months. And I want everybody viewing and everybody on this call to know it was the most miserable 9 months of my life to date. Mm-hmm. And what I learned from that experience was that there are certain things that you have to do for yourself as a form of expression. Right. And for me personally, that is to create music. So now I engineer music, and that's what I do that brings me joy, because the theme of it is something that everybody has said, which is take the time for yourself so that you can reconnect with yourself in whatever way that is most comfortable for you. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that I make time to do. The other thing is I find joy, genuine joy, in service to others. Mm-hmm. So I make it a point to do something nice for somebody every single day. And sometimes that is when I'm out holding a door. Sometimes that's sending a random text message to somebody with just words of encouragement. And I appreciate you, thank you, something along those lines. But it's ensuring that I do something nice for somebody every day, because that idea of me providing a service and giving of myself for somebody else brings me joy.
That's a great technique. That's actually like a recommended thing to address stress and loneliness, particularly like in this environment in the pandemic, of giving to others as a way to make yourself feel better and also feel happier, more content, etc.
Yep. And connected. Mm-hmm.
And connected, correct.
Mm-hmm. Suzanne, how do you incorporate helping your clients and incorporating joy into your life when you deal with such, sometimes devastating situations with the people you work with? How does that sort of affect your joy and your day-to-day life?
Yeah, like I said, it's so interesting to me because never did I feel more alive than when I worked into this space. I think it's because of gratitude. And I think when you're leaving somebody's situation, first of all, there's such a talk about connection and service and all of that. You really show up with no agenda, with an open heart, with no judgment. And there's something so pure about that human connection that you don't know these people and you've met them and there's that bond. So that feeling of energy is incredible. And then when you leave that home, you're able to walk into the sunshine. You're able to go for a run or go for a walk. And it puts a whole different perspective of gratitude on every single thing that you're able to do. And even the fact that you have a day. Mm-hmm. So it really did change my life. For me personally, and it really elevated my joy. And again, to be of service, it kind of wraps up all the things we talked about within this sacred space, which is I'm so grateful for and appreciative.
Yep. So acts of service, gratitude, checking in with yourself are all themes I'm getting here. Paul, do you have anything to add about how you personally add joy to your day?
Yes, I really like to take this concept of like leveraging things, opportunities for people, sharing. I mean, social media, love it or hate it, but I mean, it's challenging. Our circus is set up in a little town called Ludlow, Kentucky, and it's right across the river from Cincinnati, and it's kind of like the ugly stepchild of the river city. So like right across the river, there's these 3 towns that get all the love, and Ludlow has just not been that situation. But, every day that we make another circus act happen, every time people see somebody unicycling up and down the street, it shifts the mind that's meaningful.
Nice. So obviously we've talked about joy on a very granular level. From a bigger picture, how do you guys think of the ways to live a joyful life, whether it's self-care, helping people, talking more on a bigger scale than on the day-to-day level?
Well, I do think the self-care is critical. It's not very sexy and exciting, but it's real and you can't ignore it. And what I'm referring to are things like prioritizing your sleep instead of having sleep be something that you just get whatever you get at the end of whenever your day ends. So establishing or making sure that you are trying to get between 7 and 9 hours of sleep each night. That means scheduling it in. Your bedtime is this time. Attention to the food that you eat. It makes a huge difference what you put in your body. It's kind of like if once you hit the level of the luxury cars, they require premium gasoline. And if you don't put that in, they knock and make all kinds of sounds. Your body does the same thing, but we ignore it. Mm-hmm. And then also having downtime, time to quiet time, and you use it however you use it, whether it be something like meditation or listening to music, but thinking of it as a reboot, especially if you do have a very busy day where you're doing this, you've got all these responsibilities. At some point, you just need to reset.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, I feel like putting yourself first often gives you the best outcome for other people and the things you do during your day. If you've taken those steps to care for yourself, then you're presenting your best person to everyone else around you.
Correct. And one other thing about that, I'll tell patients they need to treat it as though it's a default that, because people will feel like they're doing the wrong thing by saying no to someone because they don't have enough time because they're setting aside time for themselves. But you have the right to have time to yourself. In fact, it's a necessity. So if you treat it like a necessity, it becomes easier to say no and eliminate things that crowd your life out so that you don't have time for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And Suzanne, so amongst your patients, I'm sure you have some that are either happier and more peaceful. Do you notice a trend amongst those patients of how they've lived their life? Or is it
I do. And it's like, I've done obviously so much studying about this because it's really my passion about helping people to not have this incredible fear attached to death like we do right now, how it can go better. And so for the very few, and there were very few, so death is the second leading fear in this country, except for, I think because of COVID, it bumped up to number 1. And public speaking, by the way, is number 2, because everyone always asks me that. The fear is so palpable of death that when people would get a terminal diagnosis, literally you just see denial. And I'm talking about people that were in their late 90s. I mean, it's very disconnected. And so I studied, I said, what is that fear of death? You know, because it could be different. But I feel like the fear attached to it was not necessarily the death itself. I feel it was that their time was up and they didn't live the way they authentically wanted to live. Mm-hmm. So it was full of regret. So to answer your question is the theme that I had with people who, when they were in that space, it organically or naturally was like, okay, you know, not great, but it is what it is. And I'm okay with that. They had lived with no regrets or with very little regrets. So they had lived fully, they had connected, they had really, again, lived every day with an awareness. And that allowed them to say, okay, this is where we are in this part of the journey. And that is hugely important for all of us to understand.
Yep, definitely. Mm-hmm. And Monte, you've spoken about joy as it relates to purpose. Can you speak a little bit more about that and how people can find their purpose and get joy from that?
Yes, and I think that it feeds directly off of what Suzanne just said about making that the people at the end of their life, those that didn't have as many regrets, seem to be more okay with that. Did I paraphrase that properly, Suzanne?
Yes.
Okay. So I think to that point, I have this exercise that I take my clients through when we talk about purpose, and it's 3 questions, and we go through this exercise, and it opens up this whole can of worms. So if I open up a can of worms, don't mind me. So it's 3 questions, and the first question I ask them to ask themselves is, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Right. So when you think about the things that you want to do, and that first thought comes into your head and it's, I can't do that because of, and then the list of reasons happens, right? Make note of all of those things that you want to do, and then make note of all of those reasons, right? Why you don't want to do them. And that will get you one step closer to understanding the things that you really want to do and what and closer to understanding what your purpose is. I think the second question is, and again, I struggled with this one a lot. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? So if you were guaranteed success in anything, what would you go do? I found personally that I was terrified of myself. I was terrified of myself, my potential. What happens if I'm actually successful? Will I lose? Will my wife leave me because I'm working too much? Will my kids not know me as the dad that I want to be because I'm not available enough? Will I not have any friends? Right? So it made me think about things. And when I asked myself this question, I said, oh my goodness, I'm afraid of all sorts of things. And it helped me to understand all of the things that I would do if I knew I couldn't fail. That's why I started my leadership development company, because it was based on that, right? And I think the last piece is something that I also struggle with is, what would you do if you did not have to work to pay your bills? Your bills were paid in perpetuity. What would you do? What would you do with your life? Right? And that's the question that usually opens everybody up.
Yeah. Because
there's this list of things that, well, if I didn't have to work and I could give 40 to 50 hours to something else, I would go paint, or I would try basket weaving, or I would just walk around and I would start jogging. I would be a dog walker. Some of the things that I've heard, right? And then my question becomes, so why can't we incorporate some of that now? Right? Just because you can't do it 40 hours a week, can you do it for 1? Right? And asking yourself these questions and making note of the answers. In my experience, there's always a theme that's there. And that theme puts you on the path towards what your purpose is. When I ask myself these questions, what would I do if I knew that I couldn't fail? I would start a leadership development company. What would I do? What would I do if I wasn't afraid? I would talk to people all day long and help them to unlock their potential. That's what I would do all day long. I would do it for free, right? And then it was, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? What would I do if I knew that my bills were paid? It was the exact same answer as the first two questions. So it made me say, well, if this is the trend, Mont, why aren't you doing this? And it forced me to deal with myself in a very different way. And I walked around really uncomfortable for a particular amount of months until I was able to actually accept that, hey, I'm afraid of some things. I fear some things. It's okay that I'm afraid. It's okay that I have some fears, but how do I figure out a way to love myself enough to get over those things so that I can still take the action? Does that make sense?
Definitely.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, that's for me. I know what I'm going to be doing tonight, writing down things I fear and why. So, all of you have touched upon the idea of an act of service giving you joy and you finding joy in helping others. When did you guys come to that realization that is where you want your creative path to take you down, and you wanted to open up those doors and explore the option of service as a profession?
Well, I was miserable. I had a full ride at a theater school, fancy theater school, and was pretty just not happy, just really kind of So I auditioned for Ringling Brothers Clown College, and I didn't get in the first time, which made me even more angry. So it was my senior year, and I'm dropping out of college conservatory music, blowing my scholarship, and toured with the Circus. But 3,000 people applied for Ringling Brothers Clown College. 30 people got in, 10 people got a job. So I got a lot of joy going down to the library. This is the 1900s, long before Google. And you had to Dewey Decimal that and scan through all the newspaper clippings. And we found that it was more prestigious than Harvard Medical School and the USA Today. So I got a lot of joy out of giving that to my parents and giving that to the dean and running away and joining the Circus. So maybe at other people's expense, but that really set the tone for me of trying to be a bit of a maverick, anarchist, do whatever, a clown. But yeah, it was from a place of really not being happy, feeling just unmotivated and kind of down at the bottom of things. But instead of crying about it, I joined the Circus or whatever. It was weird, but that's been my baseline, how I got there and why. And anyway, that's crazy, but.
I'd love to hear from Suzanne about how you kind of fell into your profession, because it's such an unusual field.
It really is. So I will share, and I'll try and make this condensed. On my way to nursing school, I'd pass by a hospice building, and I would say to myself, I'm going to work there one day. And I was like, why am I even saying that? I don't know why I'm saying that. It was an intuitive voice. And I kept getting the call to go apply, go apply. The minute that I did that, and again, I didn't have a lot of experience or none with end of life. The very first day with hospice, I knew I was in the exact place that I was supposed to be. It was like a piece of puzzle fitting in my life. And I said, from that moment on, I'm going to make every decision in my life based on the intuition, the knowing, not the analytical. And that led me again to not only do this work, but to realize that there's people in other countries and all over the world that don't have services, that don't have education, that don't have this conversation. I built programs and I gave them for free at the library, and then other countries would call me and I would hop on a plane and go for a month in Thailand and do 14 free trainings. And I have to tell you that those are the things that have enriched my life in the best way. I cannot explain. The free community support and service has given me the most wealth that I've ever felt. And it's all, again, based on just a heart-centered intuition of connection and following that, trusting in that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Tracey, do you have anything to add about how you got your doctorate and started doing your psychiatric work? How did you realize that's a career path you wanted to go down to help your patients on a day-to-day basis?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
Actually, I'd probably say it started in childhood. I know that sounds very Pollyanna, but I've always been one who's drawn to people who were like either socially outcast or, I would take the position, well, I'll be your friend, which is not always a good thing to do. But I was always attracted to wanting to help and protect people who were having some kind of emotional pain. Anyway, so I was going to go to med school, but then I went to go see like a doctor for the first time as a teenager, and she wore a white coat, and I thought that looks boring. So I decided to go into engineering, so I could wear a suit and be corporate. I'm so immature, but I even majored in engineering, and it wasn't until after I graduated college that I was like, this really is not where I should be. So I changed my mind and decided to go ahead and pursue medical school. But even in medical school, it was still unclear what direction I wanted to go into. And I didn't choose psychiatry until my last year, when I did a psychiatry rotation and realized that it was tons more satisfying to me helping people with mental pain than tweaking their high blood pressure medicine or something. So I guess, and then, the educational piece, I was saying that I really enjoy the creativity that I get to use in educating people online and things. I guess that was something I also realized during my, medical school training and things like that. But I guess, my mom told me ages ago, I was probably my early 20s before I went to medical school. And she said, I was telling her about this guy that I seen. And I think in retrospect, he probably had like high functioning autism spectrum disorder, and which it wasn't called back then. And I was telling her about him, and she said, you need to leave those people alone and stop being attracted to everybody with problems. And that stuck with me because I thought, well, that sounds mean, but is there something wrong with me for wanting to help people? Mm-hmm. And so it took me a little while to see that I needed to turn what was just this kind of, I guess, intuitive draw that I had and turn it into, and do it on a professional level. I don't need to date people to help them, but instead I can help them in a professional capacity.
Nice. So that kind of leads me on to the next question. We have obviously discussed what brings us joy and ways that we could apply it on a day-to-day basis, but the human experience obviously has setbacks, whether it's mental illness or a terminal illness or just changing career path. How do you guys cope with joy in the face of adversity? And I'd love to hear just stories and examples from each of you about how you've done this. Monty, we can start with you if you'd like.
Joy in the face of adversity. My goodness. So there's so many stories to share about joy in the face of adversity, but I think the most important one that I will share is a very personal one to me, just because it shows it shows the power of being anchored properly, right? So this whole idea of leading yourself effectively and doing, and everybody's a leader, it came from an experience that I had when I was 11. And long story short, I had to spend the night in a park when I was 11 in the middle of a blizzard, right? My mom, she suffered from mental illness. And during this particular event, she said, get out, go leave. And I had to leave the house. It was a blizzard. It was a situation. And that night I met a homeless gentleman by the name of Jose. To this day, I believe that Jose was an angel. He gave me a piece of his peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And he said to me, if you are able to get through the night and see the morning sun, you'll be able to get through anything in life, right? And I said, okay, I'm 11. That didn't resonate. I cried myself to sleep that night, right? And the thought that got me through the night was my sister, because she was younger than me. She is younger than me, right? And I said, if I don't get through the night, I'm not going to be able to get back home to be able to take care and protect my sister. So I have to figure this out. And at that point, that was my joy. Like that's my baby, right? To this day, that's my baby. So I was anchored in the point of the story is that obviously I made it through the night. I went home and was able to, continue life with my sister. But the point of the story is that when you go through adversity, understanding what you're anchored in and the reason why you're going through it, and understanding what you're looking forward to is supremely important. So the question would be, what are you anchored in, right? What is the end goal? If my end goal was something else that night, I probably wouldn't have made it through the night, right? But my end goal was figure out a way to get through the night so that you can make sure that you are there for your sister, because that is the goal. That's where I was anchored in family. I was anchored in being a brother. So when you're dealing with adversity, when you understand what your anchors are, that could be family, that could be the security, that could be moving things generationally. If you are dealing with a difficult customer, right? Right? When you're dealing with a difficult customer, it's the same rules apply. If you understand what you're anchored in and that your goal is to listen and turn that situation around, right? Then it allows you to take the feedback and the cursing and all the negativity with a different level of openness, because you're not taking it personally. You understand that it's part of the greater whole, so to say. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's about, you deal with adversity and finding joy in adversity by understanding what your anchors are.
Nice. Thank you very much for sharing that personal story, having that perspective. Mm-hmm. Tracey, do you have anything that you would like to share about facing adversity, whether it's you personally or just something you've experienced in your life?
Actually, not really. I hate to say that because I didn't have. I mean, there's been little things over the course of my life that set me back. Nothing huge like Monte's story. Not that this is a competition for bad things, but I was kind of reflecting on this, and I thought, why? It's not as though my life is perfect and nothing bad has ever happened to me. I think why I have such a hard time kind of coming up with a story that I think would be teachable to other people is because because of me being able to get past them and see them as teaching points or something that I learned from. Mm-hmm. And so when I look back, I don't it doesn't stand out as the horrors and let me tell you about what happened to me. Mm-hmm. It's more now that I'm on the other side, this is what I'm doing. I'm a Christian, so when bad things do happen, I rely on my higher power and believing that someone else is in control of these things. And so that it's not just up to me and what I can do to overcome this, but I need to trust in a higher power. And I do think from my experience in treating people and things that people who do, whether it's Christianity or whatever you believe, people who have something spiritual about them and rely on someone else, that sense of being able to surrender and not be burdened with the task of taking care of everything yourself is relieving, and it's freeing and enables you to process and push past it.
Yep.
Totally agree.
Yep.
Totally agree. Tracey, would you say that people who have those anchors in spirituality tend to experience more joy?
I do. I mean, I don't want to say that people who, because it's not necessarily spirituality specific.
Right.
but I do think it speaks to their ability to process things differently and not see things only in the here and now, and it's all about me and my ability to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
I do think they handle things better and have more resilience when they feel the support of someone else, something else.
Yep. Suzanne, from your experience giving end-of-life care, do you have a similar viewpoint based on people that you've worked with about spirituality, helping people guide them to the next step?
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is a very powerful statement, is that many of my patients who got their terminal diagnosis would say to me, getting that cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me. And, you think, how can somebody say that? And when they elaborate on the fact that it allowed them to stop and to get present. And a lot of the times, again, things that they thought defined them, like their job and their looks and their physical abilities or whatever, was all gone now, especially as they're declining. And they finally actually found their true essence. And what they found was something so incredibly beautiful that was there the whole time. It was covered up. So for me, I've tried to really study about what is life about? What is the whole point of life? Again, based on the wisdom, which they do have a lot of aha moments at the end. It's their spiritual wisdom, I call it. But they've shared, and again, and I fully believe this, that the times of crisis, the times of pain, of challenge are our greatest opportunities to break open and for spiritual growth or some form of growth. And so for us to hold on to, because we can't always see it. We can't always see it on the other side. So when we're going through it, and not to diminish the pain that these things cause, especially even right now, globally, what we're going through, but to hold on to the fact that the universe is always working on our behalf. I really believe that. And when you have that, to know that what's happening now, will lead you to that greater place of a higher level if we can just get through it. And I really believe to get through it, the kindness and connection of us all, especially today, when each and every one of us is suffering and going through this, if we can be kind to one another and just see each other. And I swear, if we stick together, we can do anything. Mm-hmm. I know that. So it really does help to be in that space of where you're in crisis.
So unfortunately, I have to move on to the final part, which is joy for others. So I want to reflect back, as many of our audience are members of the customer service industry. When you work with customers, you cannot always, or patients, for you guys, you can't always help the situation, and you can't change what's happening. How do you feel you can apply the advice we've learned today about how to get joy and obtain joy onto customers and deal with those situations? Monte, you can start. Yep. You work with a lot of people in leadership spaces.
Yes. So I think that there's a macro and a micro, right? The macro is anchor what you're doing inside your company's core values, right? So find the core value that means the most to you in your organization or in your department. And anchor all of your actions and try to embody that core value. Dealing with customers, it will make the process more tolerable because, again, you're rooted in something different. So you're just trying to be an embodiment of the core value and provide the best experience possible to that particular customer. So I think that's the first piece. And then from a micro level, empathy, understanding that in our jobs as customer experience professionals, first and foremost, before we solve the problem, before we give them a solution, it is to empathize with them and let them know and let the customers know that you understand things, not from your perspective, but from their perspective. Right? And you're able to see the situation from their eyes. And then once you're able to see that and they feel that you see that from their eyes, now you are able to advocate for the customer, and then they can allow you to apply your genius because we know how to solve the problem. I haven't found many problems in customer experience that we don't know how to solve. The challenge is, how do we get the customer to a place where they're open to our resolutions. And I think the key to that is empathizing and getting them to see that you are their advocate.
Nice. Paul, how do you help your I'm not sure if customers is the right word, but if you're going into these hospitals and these prisons and, you know, your situation is so vastly different to the people that you're helping, how do you try and navigate those situations?
Well, a couple years ago, I started a brewery. So like we make beer, we sell beer, and we got a couple rules. Like often people mispronounce the name of the brewery or mispronounce one of the beers they're ordering, but we never correct the customer. Like we know exactly what the customer wants, you know, and I've worked in all these other countries and I try so hard to speak the language and I'm always corrected. And I can go quickly to the, hey, I'm a big dumb American. And as soon as you say that in whatever country, they go out of their way to help you. Like if you just admit, hey, I'm trying, I'm a big dumb American. I can't fit. Oh, and it's amazing how this helps out. I'll offer the perspective too that the clown gets in trouble. And what's funny is watching the clown get out of trouble. So, you know, that's every Simpson episode. It's every Muppet Show. It's every Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, you know, and we view the world, you know, in my organization, like we're pie fighters, you know, it's sweet and dirty, you know, like don't mess with the clown, you know, like we're not playing to win. We're just playing. You know, and this infuriates, especially politicians and miserable people when they're coming at you so hard and they're so angry, but you're just playing. It's like there's no scoreboard, there's no time clock, there's no Circus Olympics for a reason. So it goes so far off key, and then you basically wear them out. Because if you have someone who's really pissed about something and you admit, hey, I'm a big dumb American, or I want to help you, and you know, it disarms people in a way that is interesting. So I'll offer that strange tactic, but like I said, it's sweet and dirty. Pie fighting. Pie fighting is a different way to look at things. But you know, our Yelp reviews are through the roof. We don't spend any money on that stuff, and it's cool to really take a completely different tact. So I'll offer that as a customer experience perspective, because that's how it works at the hospital. At the jails, people are like, man, I don't want to do that. I know you don't want to. You don't have to. It's a free country. In some countries, kids are forced to be in the circus. Like my best coach from Mongolia, like he literally was forced to be in the circus. I'm not a dentist. I mean, we're not here pulling teeth. If you want to do it, we'll get you doing it. If you want to juggle bags, you can juggle bags. If you don't want to, it's a free country. So again, a little bit cuckoo, but that's my perspective on it.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't think it's all that cuckoo, because what you're doing by putting yourself out there as the dumb guy, it makes people feel less threatened. So then they get more comfortable opening up or you know, taking a risk or doing something, you know, whatever the application is at the time.
Yeah, I agree. It's very disarming, Tracey. Yep.
So what I'm hearing is disarming situations, anchoring yourself in your roots and your core. Tracey, from your perspective, if you have patients that might be resistant to change or resistant to, you know, working through a mental health crisis, what steps do you take to try and make sure they enable joy in their life?
Try to make sure that they do what?
Still like enabling joy in their life, even if they might be resistant to a treatment plan or something of that nature.
Yeah. So what I try and do is meet them where they are, because if they're resistant to the things that I'm suggesting, then I'm missing something, and they're asking for my help for something. So I try and figure out what are their pain points, and then how about let's look at how we can help what your pain points are. And so sometimes it's about getting more concrete about what it is that they want help with. So instead of kind of looking at the big, you know, you need to get sleep, you need to meditate, you need to blah, blah, blah. Sometimes there's just too much for people to have to think about and make all these big lifestyle changes. But if someone says that they're, you know, sick of their job, or they're, you know, whatever the case is, whatever's right in front of me or right in front of them at the time, I try and break down just one simple thing, or one small, not necessarily simple, small thing that we could address, that they could do maybe to make themselves feel better on a day-to-day basis. And that could be something as non-deep as watching movies with their child holding hands on the couch or something. or treating themselves to a nice meal once a week or something.
Okay. So just enabling small joys where they can to try and push them forward and, still get them to a happy place in their life.
Yes, I like that succinct version of what I said. Thank you.
And Suzanne, finally, from your perspective, obviously, you can't always save your clients and you're dealing with these very difficult situations. How do you enable and encourage joy in some of those really tough times, especially when you're dealing with family members who might be even coping worse than the patient themselves?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of these things are what I'm going to, again, bring into this answer, is that I feel like we have so many judgments and so many, I will love you if you do this, you get this. And I think to meet people where they are, exactly what Tracey said, with no judgment, no agenda, unconditional love with an open heart, building that trust. I see you and your presence. And I often say this, the power of our presence is the best medicine we could ever give one another, because you can't fix end of life. I'm not there to rescue you, and I'm not there to take over either. I'm there to bear witness, support you, walk in this journey, and be there for whatever you need with no judgment wherever you are. And when you come, and also the other thing I really want to share with people is that remember that you never know the whole story. So for customer service, when somebody's coming at you or acting a certain way, please know that you don't know the whole story, and try not to judge that, because it usually comes up in different ways. And again, if you can open your heart and meet them with no judgment, they all of a sudden start to, the walls come down, because why aren't you fighting back with them? And when you see them for truly who they are, sometimes that is the most magic that can open up. And again, when Tracey was saying, meet them where they are, when you can get to that space, that point working forward can be all the difference in the world. So
it ties very nicely into one of my last questions, which was going to be, if a customer or a patient is coming at you with aggression or tension, what ways can you personally diffuse that situation? So it sounds like, Suzanne, you said, come from a place of no judgment, meet them in the middle. I'd love to hear, everyone else's perspective on ways they can diffuse a situation if you are becoming a scapegoat for other frustrations that someone may have.
I go out of my way to literally lower myself beneath them. So if they're standing, I sit immediately. If they're seated, I kneel. I mean, just to be in this immediately submissive place and try and have a neutral face, which is hard for me because I'm always smirking and poking at folks. But, when I do really irritate someone at a level that's extraordinary, or actions that our group does or whatever, people want to be heard, and to go to that immediacy of just, that body language goes a long, long way. And I'll just offer that as just a tactic that I use, there it is. Short and sweet.
Yep.
I look for opportunities to take ownership. So if I'm dealing with a customer, I look for ways to own what we could have done better in the situation, right? Because doing that, it kind of owns up to what the situation is and says, listen, I know that we failed, and here's why we failed, and here's what I'm willing to do to fix it. But openly owning and looking for moments and things that you can highlight as we failed here, here, and here. I found that tends to disarm the customer and put us on a level playing field, because now they're no longer fighting to be heard for us to take ownership of where we failed. So when I listen for those things, you're taking away all of their ammunition to be able to say, well, you did this and you did this, because you've already said we failed here, 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 and here. And it's totally on us, and we apologize, and we're going to fix it in these ways. So just looking for ways to take ownership, I find this very helpful.
Yeah. Tracey, you mentioned before, meeting people in the middle. Do you have any advice for people who might be facing an aggressive customer from a psychiatry perspective?
what Monty said. I mean, we're two sides of the same coin here, I see today, because I do think the most important thing is that for the person to feel heard. And so if you concede that you've missed something somewhere, you take, just like you said, take responsibility for whatever it is that, you know, they're upset about. You take some ownership of it, not all. It's not like you're supposed to say yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, because that just seems too fake, and then that can just make people even madder. Mm-hmm. But if you can find something out of all that they're saying to concede that, yeah, okay, I get that I've done this or that and the other. What else can I help you with, or something like that? Then people soften up and, okay, now, well, that's what I mean. And, you know, now they'll talk a little bit more, but now they've taken it down a notch because you're not fighting back with them.
Yep, definitely. So all things I can take to my day job tomorrow. So to tie everything together, obviously we've discussed what joy means to you, what joy means to people around you. How does being a joyful individual impact your ability to spread joy to others? And conversely, if you are having a bad day and you're feeling down, how do you personally avoid projecting that negative energy on people you work with and on your family members and friends? Paul, we can start with you and then we'll go up the list.
Well, I just paint my face all up in my clown makeup, and then no one knows how I'm suffering on the inside. I'm just kidding. Bad days, they happen, you know, and stressors happen. And it really is, my kids are, they'll be 13 and 15. So I love when they're pushing on me for some ideas and advice. And, you know, it's working with young people too, and having an organization. They know when I'm, you know, like I'm a clown, you know, my heart's on my sleeve, you know, when I'm having a good day, people know it. And that's a great challenge. So, you know, we're not perfect, you know, shake it off. And I really ask people around me to let me know when it's just when I need to go and take a break or cool off or come back. You know, it's nice to have those communication channels available that says, hey, you know, like my team knows to just do this. If I'm rambling too much or if I need to take a break, it's a visual symbol because maybe I'm not listening, but I see that. As soon as I get that, I know, all right, time for a reset. So I've worked hard at encouraging people around me to let me know when I'm, you know, not on the spot, and that's what I'll offer.
Mm-hmm. Who wants to add to that? Monty, do you want to share your thoughts on how to, you know, not push bad negative energy onto others if you're having a bad day, or the converse? Yes.
So again, it's an internal and an external thing. Internally, I allow myself to feel. I don't put a stopgap and say I'm not supposed to feel this or ridicule myself for feeling it. I allow the emotions to flow internally. Externally, I communicate. And I let my wife, my kids, when it's applicable, I let my leaders in leadership know, listen, here's what's going on, just so that they can contextualize everything, right? And the last piece is, with all of that, then I do the best that I can to get through the day, right? Because I'm allowing myself to feel. I've made everybody aware around me so that they can contextualize anything that seems off. So now all I have to do now is, with my customers and with my clients, make sure that I call it leaking, make sure that nothing leaks through, right? And that is a moment by moment kind of thing, just a hyper awareness and maintaining a high level of awareness for that day.
I agree. I think being mindful of your emotions and then not letting them project on your day-to-day activities is super important, especially when you're customer facing. Tracey, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I kind of do the same thing. I mean, I'm not that great at it, depending on the mood that I'm in at the time. I may have the wherewithal to make the announcement, I'm not having a good day, just don't talk to me. But if I'm not there, like somebody has irritated me, I actually just try and keep my mouth shut, because not everything needs to be said. When I was 20, I would have just said whatever. But as an older person, learned that it's really, some things just aren't that important, and I can express myself to a friend or my partner. My husband doesn't have to be the one who hears everything that I'm thinking, and that's okay. So I find other ways to kind of process frustrations and just kind of zip it so I don't say too much to people.
Definitely. And Suzanne, do you have any final thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I think again, self-care is, when you care for yourself, you are caring for all of your customers and everyone else. And this was something that was so important because I think we're taught not to, that it's selfish, or especially if we're women and helping professions and all of that. It is so vitally important to be in tune with what you need. And you can offset things from really crashing or hitting a wall or getting to that explosive place by saying, you know what, I'm feeling uncomfortable, or I'm feeling a heaviness, or I need to take a break, and go give yourself the minutes or whatever it is that you need to neutralize, because energy is contagious. If it's joyful energy, that's contagious and that's great. And if it's an angry, heavy energy, that affects people too. And most of all, you don't want that for yourself, because inflammation and your own stress, we've connected to illness and all of these things. So really to be in tune with how you feel, mind, body, spirit, and own that and care for yourself.
Yep.
Adjust it. Yeah.
Definitely. So we do have a couple questions, but we will jump to them in the next portion. Unfortunately, we are out of time, and I feel like we could have talked for a lot longer. But I want to thank all of you so much for joining us today. It's been so helpful. I've definitely learned a lot that I could take back to my job as well. So I want to thank all of you. And we're now moving on to the guided brainstorm. So feel free to join as well. But we'll just click right into that session now.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for meeting you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Pleasure.
Hello, everyone. So the next part is a guided brainstorm. And we have a special guest joining us, Mo McKibbin. So I think we did have one question. I'm just going to pull it up from the chat box. Mm-hmm. So Frankie Lawson said, how do each of you handle a customer that is threatening or become aggressive, and how do you turn that into a joyful interaction?
I mean, that is it really, for me, it really depends largely on the context of their aggression. So if it's, I mean, honestly, every time a customer comes at us, or my team or me, with aggression, the first thing I ask is like, is it merited? And sometimes it is. Right? So if it's, looking through it at through that lens first and foremost, I think right now, especially with kind of like everything that's going on in like the world and specifically our country right now, we most people are. I mean, like, I know it's funny because like I actually recently lost my job and then I found a new one right away. But like for those 2 weeks that I like didn't know what was going on, I felt like I got very aggressive when something happened. Like I didn't get a refund from something that I returned like weeks ago, and was like, hey, I need that amount of money like now. So I think just meeting customers where they are, and like, first of all, figuring out if it's merited, and then just doing whatever you can to empower your team to solve that problem, and meet them where they are and like feel like the empathy for them. Mm-hmm. That said, there are definitely situations that I have been in that are not merited. And I think in those situations, like, I don't know, what I have kind of done in the past is like, I mean, we did this especially at Help Scout, is, Help Scout has like a very like egalitarian, for a long time, they don't really anymore because they've kind of scaled out of it, but for a very long time they had like this very like egalitarian support model where there's not like everyone was like a senior level support person, and also there was like there were coaches and players, but pretty much everybody was like, you know, what would be considered like the highest tier. They just always hired senior level people. And so in those, like, we would definitely have situations where, you know, things like customers would get aggressive with us in kind of unmerited situations after we've met them where they were. We presented them with multiple solutions. You know, we took all of those things into consideration. And in those cases, we either had we would have like either a fake support lead come in or actually special guest Nick Francis, the CEO, and kind of like write an email to, rehashing the situation that like, this is, these are what the options are. These are like always coming with a reason about why those options are what the options are, and have the reason not be like, it's policy, or we just can't do that, or, like having like really good solid reasonings behind why we can't do exactly what they're asking. It does sometimes help to have like that extra like level of leadership come in to sort of make the customer feel like they've gone to the highest escalation that they can.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, like you said, coming from a place of empathy, understanding that you need to give them a proper reason to kind of disarm their response, and then having leadership on makes them feel respected, like they're super important. They have, the big boss come on and help disarm the situation. I agree that I find that the most helpful to take a customer down and sort of calm their anxieties and move forward with the situation. To add to that, I think personally, it's good to not keep circling the same topic over and over again. Keep it concise. Sometimes you can talk in circles, and it's important to really control that conversation and to prevent further escalation.
Agreed.
Monte, do you have any thoughts as well? I know that you have a lot of experience in this area about how to disarm like angry customers.
So I usually take my team through a 4-step process, and we harp on this in trainings all the time. And it's listen differently is the first step. And what you're listening for is not what the customer says is wrong, but what the actual problem is, right? Many cases, and where this came from was, I would jump on these escalations many times, and I would grab the headset and I would start listening to the customer. And by the time it came to me, it was the issue wasn't what the rep told me it was about. Now the customer was angry at the service that they had received up to that point after the failure happened, right? So, and nobody was dealing with that. So they would go from call to call to call, and they would say, well, the rep before you said this, and the rep before you said this, and the rep before you said this. And the agent is saying, and the teammate is saying, well, I just want to solve the problem, not recognizing that the problem has now switched. Right? You can give them the solution, but now who's going to remedy the fact that I just got passed around from teammate to teammate to teammate to teammate? So it's about listening differently first. Secondly, it is acknowledging what the truth of the situation is, even if you as the teammate or you as the business are wrong. The third step I find to be, the third and fourth steps I find to be the most empowering, which are validate the customer's emotions, not the situation, right? How they're behaving could be wrong, but there's still an opportunity to validate that it's okay for them to feel however they want to feel. And then you can start to redirect the conversation for how they express that emotion. But you are totally valid in feeling whatever you want to feel. You're a person, you can feel that. And the last piece is ownership, right? And us taking ownership for whatever part that we have to play in the entire situation, right? And many times by the time I get on the phone, I'm owning everything, right? I'm an officer of the business. You're not just talking to me, you're talking to somebody who's representing it. So if ops failed, we failed, period. So I'm owning everything. So usually going through that process, by the time I get there, and those are usually the longer calls, the 35, 40-minute conversations, because you got to allow them to get through it. But by the time I get to taking ownership, I usually have a friend at the end of these conversations.
Yep. So to get the most out of this session, I was hoping that we could just brainstorm different scenarios or situations that might come up often. Of course, anyone in the audience can put in the chat something that they would like to present. But, you know, Mo, you might have dealt with certain situations that you think really tie into the topic of joy. And I would love to hear some of maybe a situation that you dealt with at work, whether it be having a bad day and then not bringing it home to roommates or family members. Can you shed a bit of light on how you cope with situations like that?
Yes, this is a good question that I probably am not an expert on. But I will say this. I've had like a tremendous amount of success and personal joy right now, like just kind of forgiving and accepting myself and my feelings as how they are. So here's how I like don't keep negative energy with me is somebody was sharing around this like Maslow's hierarchy of needs image where it was like, you know, when you think about like all of the wonderful things that you like to achieve, like kind of before really the last couple months, I was like working on a book. I was doing yoga all the time. I was having like, I was starting a business. I had like this whole realm of like things that I wanted to achieve. And like on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's obviously like that self-actualization sort of like peak of the pyramid. We are all collectively like at the bottom of the pyramid right now. We are in like health and safety. We are in like security and housing. Like we are in like, I don't know if the business that I'm working for is going to last through this, or if my family is going to last through this. So we are all in kind of like this collective crisis where we are at the Maslow, the bottom of the pyramid. So with that, it's funny. Being an overachiever, I often have extra guilt for not being like my best self and accomplishing a lot of those things. So the way I have just started forgiving myself for things like, as soon as work is over, I'll close my computer and I will do what Tracey did and I will binge watch a show like Gossip Girl because I know what's going to happen because I've seen the show 3 times. I'm going to like let myself enjoy it and forgive myself for being where I'm at because like right now, nobody is in a good place.
Yep. So kind of touching on the COVID aspect, Leanna from the audience said that she would love to hear ways to incorporate joy into the new work-life balance. Obviously, most of us are working from home, so there's a very blurred line between when work starts, when work ends. You just mentioned shutting your laptop the moment work is done. Do you guys have any other tips on how to keep your mental health and your sanity and just getting that joy in your life when everything is kind of blurred together?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Suzanne.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think perspective is so very important to understand. And you have a choice. It's like putting on lenses and putting on glasses and changing the perspective. So one of the examples that was given to me, which was so really great, is that when people were going through house fires and the 2 people on the same street both lost their house, burned to the ground, lost all their belongings. You know, one was just obviously, and you know, there's no real right or wrong. It's just perspective. One was saying, I can't, you know, everything's gone. We have nothing. We have no life. And that was that. The people who were in a similar situation said, our kids are out, we're out, our animals are out. That was just stuff. You know, this is a chance to rebuild. Thank God we're okay. They both had that same and different perspectives. And I'm not saying, again, with no judgment, one's right or one's wrong, but we have a choice of what lenses that we choose to look through in the day. And that can change your entire life knowing that. So again, not taking this stuff on. I mean, and we don't know other people's stories. People who are angry hurt people. So when people, and you know what, unfortunately, customer service, you guys and nurses, we're prime targets. We're on those front lines. Give it to me, punch me. So they are. And then when you can understand that and be in that space of just hearing and seeing them and not taking it with you and choosing, again, the perspective that you want to live in, it can really be a joyful life. No matter like where we're at, which is powerful.
Yeah, I agree with that, Suzanne, about the perspective piece in particular. And to build on that, I would say, look for, Leanna, I would say look for the silver lining. Act it, like, maintain a level of presence where you can look for the silver lining, things that you are now able to do, or things that you now have as a result of the COVID situation that you didn't have before. Now, so that's like the kind of bigger strategic viewpoint. Here's the tactical piece. Repurpose your commute time. So the time that you would spend, whether it's 15 minutes there and 15 minutes back, that time that you would spend getting to the office and back, repurpose that for something that brings you joy. Whether that is sitting down, having a cup of coffee, whether that's reaching out to a family member, whether that is taking a walk, right? Repurpose your commute time and use that to find your center and your balance. One of the things that I've actually started to put into practice is at the end of my workday, I go for a walk around the block, and that's my commute. Now, it usually takes me an hour to get to and from the city, right? But after work, I log off for a moment, even if I have to log on again, because I have an issue, I'm a workaholic. So even if I log on again afterwards, when I shut down for the day, I leave my house and I walk around the block once or twice to kind of do that reset and kind of recenter myself. And then I get back to it, right? Because I recognize that going to work and coming to work, going to work and coming home, valuable time. When you go to work, you're planning your day, whether you know it or not. When you're leaving work, you're decompressing. And when while we're home, we're not looking at it in that framework. So it just all jumbles up together. But if you kind of repurpose that as plan your day with your time commuting to work in the morning, decompress with the time at the end of the day, it may help to help you find some balance.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. I feel like prior to this, I didn't realize how much I appreciated that separation of space between work and home. And I think a lot of it, dealing with burnout, self-care, and taking the time for yourself, you kind of forget. You wake up, you get straight to your laptop, you shut it, then you go to bed. And that's really good advice, actually, is to repurpose that time. And I think that'll definitely help me reframe my mornings and my evenings for sure. Just jumping back to the idea of keeping yourself motivated when the world looks like it's kind of crumbling and everything looks a bit disastrous. Do you guys have any advice to staying grounded and not getting sucked into a lot of the external issues that have really been, coming up and bubbling up over the last sort of 6 months?
One of the things that I want to share, and I know this doesn't sound maybe like everyone, it's going to make a lot of sense, but it does, is to limit your exposure to the news and to also limit your exposure to Facebook, to social media. And I know because we're home and these are the ways that we're connecting, we have to be extremely mindful of the energy getting swept up into that, which is all very negative and low vibration and very easy to get in that chaos and fear. And we are going through a struggle. Each one of us is dealing with this on our own. We don't want to heighten that. So that goes into your subconscious mind, is very, very, very damaging. So yes, we want to know what's happening, but be mindful. And social media is a very negative place too. I mean, I like connecting with my friends, but every time I put it on, everyone is screaming at each other about something. So I want to see this productive conversation. I want to see what can we use in this time of cracking open to come up with new solutions, to come together as a community, to have a Zoom social party that everyone's invited to, come up with new education, new ways of being kind to one another, of service, proactive more than the other way.
Yep.
Suzanne, I'd like to also add, just in terms of another tactical thing to keep yourself just kind of like motivated despite this shitstorm that we live in. This is actually harkens back to your point on perspective, which is that, you know, you can focus on the things that you can control. Like most of us love our jobs. I mean, you wouldn't be in the CX for the soul thing if you didn't care a lot about what you do and getting better. So most of us love our work. Most of us know exactly how to do a great job. Most of us know what our customers need and want to execute that and like so focusing on the things that you can control, which is, you know, the things that you've done every day before, you know, February and everything that you're going to do, and just shifting your perspective away from, you know, like the news and social media. I strongly recommend not checking Facebook first thing in the morning, because like when I was doing that, it was like I was in a doom spiral and taking depression naps in the middle of the day. So just shifting that perspective to the fact that there are a lot of things in your life that you can control, and even though you can't control those things, like that, those can go in a different computer screen that you don't ever open.
So Mo, I love that. And I just want to add two things, because we just did this. I said, write down a list of what you can't control and what you can control. And two of the first things that I put up is I can't control the virus. I can control wearing a mask and how kind I am to somebody. I can't control people's anger and fear. I can control being kind. And the other is I can control how I care for myself. Yeah. And that was really empowering, just those little switches, and let go of the things you can't control, because we can't control them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think, especially talking to customers, if they do lash out or have aggression, I think acknowledging that there might be stuff in their life or in their business that's very affected by COVID. And on the flip side, I can't control their reaction, but I can control my reaction to how they are making me feel. You know, it's a good thing to acknowledge how they're feeling, process it, but ultimately not to carry that through to other conversations or to conversations with my colleagues, to really define my feelings, acknowledge them, and then move forward.
I love how somebody phrased it. They said, it's not yours to pick up. Don't pick up stuff that's not yours. And we're always kind of getting involved with other people's things, and they're having, oh my gosh, and you're swept away in it. Make sure that you know you can still be so effective. You know, you can have a response, but don't be reactive, and don't pick up other people's stuff, and always be compassionate and empathetic and kind.
Yep. I think it kind of goes back to what we said in the panel too, is that you don't really ever know what's going on in someone else's life. You might have an aggressive conversation with a customer, but we don't know the full story behind that and why that interaction is occurring. And, you know, trying to take it for what it is. And
it's not.
Yeah, acknowledging that you're not going to know the full story.
No.
Yeah.
I have a personal story about that from my Starbucks days, like 10 years ago, where there was this woman who was always the nicest woman, and she got a tall non-fat with whip white mocha every day. And something happened in a rush, and like I like must have missed it or something, and like she'd been waiting forever, and I didn't have it like in the line or whatever, and she chewed me out like I've never been chewed out before. And I was just like, what is this woman's problem? She was totally always very nice. And then the next day, because like, you know, with Starbucks you get like repeat face-to-face people, she came, you know, around to the side of the bar, and she apologized. She's like, I'm really sorry. Yesterday my mother died. And so it totally was not, it had nothing to do with the fact that like I missed her drink, you know, like that was an overblown reaction to something that she had a right to be upset about. But at the same time, like it was, you know, like just fix the problem and, you know, like be apologetic and, you know, and hope for the best on that situation. But like, the anger that was coming had nothing to do with Starbucks or me or anything. It had everything to do with her personal life.
Yep.
Yeah. And usually does, by the way. And one of the things that I think when we are moving so quickly, one of the things that because you're not going to make everyone happy. No, not everyone's going to be your best friend. That's just how the world works, is that if you make sure that you are always in the highest integrity and doing the right thing at the best of your ability, you're good.
Right.
You're good.
Yeah. I think
and look at the audience, like the audience that you have, because, you have your office, you have your team, you have your customers, you have all these things. And, Suzanne, when you were talking about don't pick up what's not yours, this is a kind of a little crazy circus diatribe, sideways, but there were 22 elephants with Ringling Brothers, and they were all female elephants. And before they would get on the train, they would take care of business. So they'd have like 3-foot piles of shit, like right there in the arena. All right. And no one is looking at all the aerialists. No one's looking at anything except that giant pile of crap, And as a clown, I stole all the focus. I would go and I would step right in that gigantic pile, and I'd get 10,000 people on this side of the arena to laugh, and I'd slow burn to this side. And, it just perhaps, when the person is going off, because Mo, when you were there at Starbucks, everyone was looking, everyone was watching you get chewed out, and you accepted and you took it. And then she came the next day around the corner, you said, and apologized. She didn't come and announce everybody, hey, perhaps there's a different tactic to take, and not to clean up other people's stuff, Suzanne, but when there's a gigantic pile of poop and there's 20,000 people looking at it, if you could be the clown and step in that, there is an incredible amount of power that's there. I'm just going to offer it to you. Yes, you got to clean, you got to hold your nose, but yeah, I'll just offer that up.
Oh, no. So let me just clarify. I love to help clean up stuff as long as people want it to be its equal. I just mean don't pick up their energy. Don't carry that with you when it's not yours. But yeah, let's help problem solve.
Okay.
So are you saying we could solve the world's problems by having like huge piles of poop in places?
It exists.
And just changing the person. Yeah. Okay. Love elephants.
I got, I got in a lot of trouble from the leadership at Ringling because they didn't like it, but it was hilarious. It's an infantile system, but I'm just throwing it out there that, I don't know if I'll be invited back to more customer service, but, I did get in trouble from the leadership when I stepped in the poop because I wasn't supposed to, but the people loved it. It was so much power.
So kind of on what you're saying about getting in trouble with leadership or just having those conflicting opinions, I have a question to pose to everyone. When you practice aspects of, self-care or bringing yourself joy in times of such turmoil, how do you cope with feelings of like selfishness? Like I can't be feeling happy when the world is so sad, or I can't be prioritizing myself when, there are people that are in way worse situations than me right now. Do you guys have any tips or tricks that people can take home about how to be selfish in a very hard time?
I always think of the metaphor specifically, you have to put on your own oxygen mask first. You can't take care of other people if you're not taking care of yourself. So having those, if you're feeling setting work boundaries, for example, being like, hey, these are my work hours. Like, this is like where I am here. I need that to be able to like have energy to do this 40 hours a week. Setting those boundaries, taking that time for yourself when you need it is super important to be able to give that back to other people, because as like leaders, you need to be able to give that back to your team, and you are not going to be able to give it back to your team if you are not taking it for yourself first.
Agreed wholeheartedly, Mo. One of the things that I've struggled with is discipline, right? Discipline was a huge struggle. So in 2017, I made a deal with myself, and I said, I'm going to get up every morning and make my bed. And it seems so simple, but the idea was I need to practice discipline. And if I can't find 2 minutes and 39 seconds, because that's how long it took to make my bed, If I can't find 2 minutes and 39 seconds a day, then I have to do some deeper digging, right? And what I found was that after I went the whole year of 2017, waking up every morning, making my bed and saying, okay, how can I add value to somebody's life? I recognized that I had to switch that question. And the question then became, how can I add value to my life so that I can add the most value to everybody else's life, right? So to answer the question directly, Flavia, when everything is going on in the world and there's all this negativity and you seem to be getting down by it, you or anybody else, the idea of thinking about how can your positivity, you maintaining a positive attitude, make things easier for everybody else, right? So it's taking a moment to be selfish, acknowledge everything, and then say, okay, now that I feel this, how can I take this feeling and use it for the good of others, right? So it's still taking it and switching and turning it into this idea of service.
Yep, definitely. I agree with that. I think, like everyone said, that being there for yourself really brings your best self to work. It brings your best self to the people you live with, your roommates, your family. And then that in turn can help maybe inject some positivity. And it's not about being selfish or, caring for yourself first. It's about bringing your best self to the table wherever you can.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. It's some great tips as well. And one final question, I'd just like to ask, how people are now getting motivated. Before you get up, you have your coffee, you go to the office, you have a very distinct routine, and then you're surrounded by coworkers, which really helps boost you up and keep you motivated on a day-to-day basis. Now we're working in much more isolation. How are you keeping yourself motivated on a day-to-day basis to still bring your best self to work?
This has been, I think, that one of the biggest challenges that I saw coming with the shutdown and the social isolation was the mental problem compared to how we used to be living, because we are social creatures. And so we put up group meetings 3 times a week for anybody, just socialization. And people would say that sometimes that was the only time they got out of bed in the first few weeks, because they didn't have anyone standing over them. And some people didn't maybe have a schedule that they had to adhere to work-wise. But the importance of developing the new way of having some kind of schedule, caring for yourself, making sure that you have, and that group was very pivotal, people being accountable, because they showed up and said, yes, I did do my things. And if they didn't have anywhere to go to kind of be accountable, and it wasn't like no one was being, looked at bad if they didn't do it, but just knowing that we all had each other's backs, that we all knew what we were going through this really difficult time, and wanted to create a beautiful support system to help navigate through, not only navigate through, but hopefully thrive through this new way of life. That's a marathon. It's not, it is going to be on the long haul. So we really want to incorporate whatever we can to help motivate people, because people are alone and it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
So I have worked remotely for several years. And so I will say all the same rules apply in terms of when you have a positive work environment, it motivates you to do better. And there are definitely ways that you can increase, positive work environment that causes that sort of collaboration and togetherness, even if you're doing it remote. Now, granted, I am like poster child millennial, so I grew up on like AOL. So it's not that weird of a switch to me to move from like, friends on Slack to like friends in chat in real life. However, I will say there's a couple of things that we would do at Help Scout that I've loved so much that I've actually brought them to other companies that I've worked at since then. Is a Warm Fuzzy channel. So that is a way that anyone in the company can shout out and elevate really great work that's happening among their teams, and give people on your team or on other teams, or even just cross teams, like visibility into something awesome that they've done. They would normally not get visibility into. Another thing that I would strongly recommend, specifically since this is a C team thing, is like, depending on how large your company is, like, okay, so sometimes like in Slack, you have like an off topic. I would recommend creating a social group specifically for your team, because you want to keep your regular channel, like, so we had C team private, like for work conversations, and people can actually get frustrated if there's like too much derailment from like work conversations that are important from like social chit chat. However, like sometimes participating in something as large as off topic can be like really intimidating on a social thing, whereas like you really know you're like 10 or 15 team members and like them. So creating like a C team social creates a place for just your team to socialize. And then it's not getting in the way of, the group chat. Actually, it helps out C team social. So many like people would just pop in because of for some random reason. And like, it ended up becoming not just C team social, because it was like people thought the conversations we were having and they were so fun that it was just like we had 15 people on the team and there were like 27 people in that channel. So yeah, there are definitely ways that you can foster like a social environment over chat. But yeah, I would strongly recommend using Slack in a way that you can elevate your other team members to give them visibility to the whole company for their accomplishments. Because I think so often, especially in customer experience roles, like it can feel like all of our work just goes unsung. So like using Slack to elevate team visibility, and then also like leveraging ways that you can socialize with your team outside of the normal scope of work with like a Slack channel is my kind of 2 tips to keep you connected but also motivated.
Great. I think I'll try and take you up on some of those tips with my own team to keep us connected and motivated. We're doing a pretty good job, but advice is definitely going to be taken as well. We're just about getting to the end of our time here, and it's been so great chatting with everyone. I'd love to just finally end on some words of advice from Monte that we can take to the audience about how to continue to bring joy in their life in this remote environment. And if you have any tips or tricks from your time working, with so many different companies, that'd be an awesome place to leave off with some final piece of advice.
So a couple things. One, push your teams and push yourself to find out what you want to do outside of work. Like use the time that you're not in the office, right? And that you're not connected in. Use it as a time to explore some of the other things that you want to do in your life. Right? Because this time we're more disconnected from everybody, right? Because of the quarantine, but it does give us the opportunity to connect with ourselves in a very different way. And if you're a leader, take the time to reach out to not just your leaders, but the individuals on your team. Like all of them, right? And make sure that your leaders are doing the same thing. What I find to be the most difficult part of working remotely is maintaining authentic connectivity, right? Connectivity that's not just based on a task, that's not just based on something that's needed, but connectivity that is based on the genuine care that you could feel from a person when you were in the office. And my biggest piece of advice is to look for ways to communicate that level of authenticity, right? So if that means, one of the things that I've done with my team is you don't need a meeting for us to have a Zoom. Send me a chat and say, I want to talk, right? And I immediately, instead of having that conversation on chat, because we can do that, but it's not as personal, right? And I look for the opportunities to kind of jump on, and I allow them to, which leads me to my next point, I allow them to see me vulnerable, right? This is an amazing time during COVID to get comfortable being vulnerable, because you get to see into people's houses and their homes. And listen, I'm surprised that my 4-year-old's name is Magnus. I'm surprised he didn't come in here yet, right? But these are the things. So use it as an opportunity to be vulnerable and connect on a level of vulnerability. And you can use this distance as a mechanism to be closer and more connected as a team.
Thank you guys so much for your time today. I really appreciate every one of you coming out and sharing your feedback and your thoughts on joy. I think a lot of us have some amazing things to take away to bring back for our home life and our professional life as well. And don't forget to please post and use the hashtag CX for the Soul, and we will donate $5 to the Boys and Girls Club of America. Thank you very much again. I really appreciate everyone's time, and hopefully we can do this again.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.